In mass consumer society, how is this culture defined? In previous epochs, this question concerned with the tastes and habits of the elite. However, in the democratic revolution that informs contemporary society, this answer is not so efficient. Here lies the theory of Otsuka Eiji's narrative conception as a means to understand and interpret modern culture phenomena. Otsuka Eiji is a cultural critic within the post-war Japanese tradition. In his analysis, he focused on the cross-sections of identity, society, and consumption as it relates to the post-war Japanese social culture. In the context of the post-war 20th century, Otsuka's theory will find good use. In this brief video, we will elaborate on the origins of post-war Japanese culture through the lens of Otsuka-san's cultural theory. In the aftermath of the Pacific War, Japan as a cultural institution was shattered at its core. What defined the warriors was a culture of state worship seen through the emperor as the totem of meaning and signification. After the war, with the occupation held by America's scalp, the emperor had to renounce his divinity, and thus the apparatus that held both state and culture was destroyed forever. Through this vacancy, the arrival of American consumer culture replaced and recontextualized what it meant to be Japanese in the nascent democratic society. From early as the 1960s, a new culture emerged from the bottom up, which was termed seinen, or youth in its American translation. This seinen culture was defined by the taste and consumption habits of Japan's teenage to early adult culture, which was heavily influenced by America's popular youth trends of its day. In opposition to the Americanization was the Japanese far left, seen to its two dominant factions, Zengaku and Zengoku. The latter, Zengoku, dominated Japanese youth culture in the late 60s. The Zengoku were a nihilist communist faction that heralded the philosophy of intellectual and cultural critic Yoshimoto Taki's Satose of self-negation as the ultimate protest of American consumer culture. This crescendo of virulent leftist youth activism eventually led to the '68 protests, which resulted in severe crackdowns on student protests by the Japanese government. The aftermath of these crackdowns diminished the cultural influence of leftism in Japanese youth culture and the arrival of a unique Japanese consumer culture that followed the 70s. Otsuka's narrative consumption theory situates itself within the confines of Japan's 70s youth culture. In his theory, the critical objects are children's candy, specifically Bakugan, chocolate candies, and surprise communized stickers. These stickers, Otsuka-san argues, forms pieces of a larger narrative that entices the consumer to buy more products to complete the narrative. Otsuka-san relates this to the nascent Japanese otaku anime culture of the 1970s. However, for the purposes of this video, we will recontextualize it for post-war Japanese culture as a whole. These narratives presented in his theory are the nature of identity as it relates to postmodernity. Postmodernism earnestly started in Japan in 1945. Since then, Japan has reformulated itself in a pastiche of narratives and identities that overcrowded its democratic market. From the 60s, presents a foray-on the narratives expressed in the nascent phenomenon of subculture. Youth subculture of the Japanese 60s was not only seen through American consumer culture, but Japan's unique adoption of its aesthetics. From here, Japanese youth assimilate culture as a means of narrative affirmation. The beatniks of America's Beat Generation are now seen through the Japanese Zoku tribe as a means of collective affirmation, and so on. Even the Zengoku fits the same Zuko schema as the student activists collectively participate in Yoshimoto-san's Gishin no Sujin meta-narrative of post-war Japan's acceptance of America's so-called fascist occupation. Ultimately, what we see here is that narrative in Japan's post-war Jedi is not occupied with the simple affirmations of state worship and filial piety, but narrative itself as a means of democratic group identification and affirmation. Otsuka Eiji's contributions to cultural theory help contextualize the nation youth culture of the post-war Judah, while creating the theoretical schema to interpret it. Through his work, there becomes the means to define postmodernity in 20th century post-war Japan, as well as the philosophical grounding of his intellectual successor, Azuma Hiroki. Thank you for your time and have a great day.